Moses is 80 years old. He has been in the wilderness of Midian for 40 years, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. The first part of his life, his Egyptian upbringing, his killing of the overseer, his flight from Pharaoh, is 40 years in the past. He is a shepherd, an exile, a husband, and a father. He has, in all visible ways, settled into the life of a quiet and ordinary man. And then one day he leads his flock to the far side of the desert, to the mountain of God, Horeb, and he sees a bush that is burning. And he looks, and the bush is burning, but it is not consumed. And Moses says, I will turn aside and see this great sight. Why is the bush not burnt? And when the Lord sees that he has turned aside to look, God calls to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses says, Here I am. And God says, Do not come near. Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Maslow was frustrated for much of his career with the tendency of psychology to focus on pathology, on what went wrong with human beings, on neurosis and disorder and failure. He wanted to know what went right. He wanted to understand the highest, fullest expressions of the human experience. And so he began systematically to interview people about moments that they described as the best, most memorable, and most deeply meaningful experiences of their lives. What he found across a wide range of people from very different backgrounds was a cluster of experiences that shared a remarkable set of features. He called these peak experiences, and he described them with great care. In a peak experience, the person feels a sense of unity, a dissolving of the usual boundaries between self and world. The ordinary categories of time and space feel different. Time seems to stop, or to expand, or to become irrelevant. There is a sense of completeness, of perfection, of things being exactly as they should be. The experience is felt as more real than ordinary reality, not less. There is often a sense of awe, of reverence, what the German theologian Rudolf Otto called the numinous, the encounter with something that is simultaneously overwhelming and fascinating. And the experience typically involves a complete absorption of attention. In the peak moment, everything else falls away, and what is present is all that exists. He also noted, importantly, what peak experiences tend to produce in the aftermath: a sense of having been given something, of having been changed, of gratitude, and often, not always, but often, a reorientation of the person's life in the direction of what the experience reveals. Now, let's look at the burning bush through this lens. Moses turns aside. This is the first thing. He could have kept walking. The text is careful to note that God calls to him when the Lord sees that he has turned aside to look. Moses' response to the unusual, his willingness to stop, to leave the path, to investigate rather than pass by, is what creates the conditions for the encounter. Maslow observed that peak experience, while they are in one sense given, they arrive unexpectedly. They cannot be manufactured, are in another sense prepared for by a particular kind of attentiveness. The person who is moving through life too fast, who has no capacity for being stopped by the unexpected, who has learned to filter out everything that doesn't serve the current agenda, this person is less likely to notice the burning bush. Not because the bush isn't there, but because they have trained themselves not to see it. Moses, at 80 years old, is walking slowly. He has time. He sees a strange sight and he turns aside. And in the turning aside, everything changes. The details of the encounter at the burning bush map with striking precision onto Maslow's description of the peak experience. The bush burns and is not consumed. This is, in the most literal sense, a disruption of ordinary reality. The laws of the natural world are suspended. Fire consumes. This fire does not. Moses is confronted with something that cannot be explained within his existing categories. This is characteristic of what Maslow called the B cognition, the cognition of being, as distinct from D cognition, the cognition of deficiency. In ordinary D-cognitive consciousness, we perceive the world through the filter of our needs and expectations. We see what we need, what we fear, what we expect. The burning bush cannot be seen through this kind of filtering. It demands a different kind of attention. Moses is told to remove his sandals because the place where he is standing is holy ground. The removal of the sandals is a gesture of vulnerability, of directness, of the removal of mediation between the person and the ground beneath them. Maslow described peak experiences as involving a loss of the defenses and filters that ordinarily stand between the person and their experience. The sandals, the protection, the distance, the insulation from the earth come off. Moses stands on the ground directly. And God says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. I am the God of the long story. I have been here all along. Moses hides his face, afraid to look at God. Maslow observed that peak experiences characteristically involve what he called humility in the face of what is encountered. Not the false humility of self-deprecation, but the genuine humility of someone who has encountered something so much larger than themselves that the ordinary ego concerns, am I good enough? Will I succeed? What do others think of me? Simply fall away. There is something so much bigger present that the self's usual agenda becomes irrelevant. What God says to Moses at the bush is extraordinary. He says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry. I know their suffering. I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Come down. The creator of the universe has come down. The transcendent has come into the particular, into a specific place, a specific bush, on a specific afternoon, to a specific man named Moses who was on his way to a specific pasture. Maslow was fascinated by what he calls the sacralization of the ordinary, the experience, the characteristic of peak moments and of the self-actualizing person more generally, in which the everyday and the transcendent are experienced as continuous rather than opposed. The bush is not extraordinary before Moses turns aside. It is just a bush. It is a bush that happens to be burning. The holiness is not separate from the ordinary, it is revealed within it. And the revelation carries an instruction. Come down to deliver them. And now comes Moses' specific part in this. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh. Peak experiences in Maslow's framework are not endpoints, they are openings. The person who has a genuine peak experience is typically not left simply glowing with remembered bliss. They are pointed somewhere, they are given a direction. The experience of the transcendent, when it is genuine, creates a responsibility in the person who receives it. Moses' first response to this is famously to resist. Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? God says, I will be with you. Moses says, but what is your name? God says, I am who I am. Moses says, what if they don't believe me? God gives him signs, the staff that becomes a serpent, the leprous hand, the water turning to blood. Moses says, I am not eloquent, I am slow of speech. God said, I will be with you in your mouth. Moses says, please send someone else. And God's anger is kindled at Moses, but he does not withdraw the commission. Maslow would smile at this because one of his consistent findings about self-actualizing people, the people who had genuinely encountered the peak, who had genuinely heard the call, was that they also frequently resisted it. Not because they didn't believe in the call, but because they understood better than anyone what it would cost. And they went anyway. Moses goes, he takes the staff, he returns to Egypt, he stands before Pharaoh, he leads a people through the sea on dry ground. But he would never have gone if he hadn't turned aside to see a bush that was burning and not consumed. If he hadn't been the kind of person who, at 80, walking slowly across the wilderness, could still be stopped by something strange, could still say, I will turn aside and see this great sight. The capacity to be stopped, the willingness to look, the readiness to remove your sandals and stand on holy ground. It might be the most important thing Moses ever did.